Good morning, everybody. We'll get started in just a second. Okay, so I understand why the market was going crazy pumping yesterday. Just give me a second and we'll go over it. Okay, so the main reason why we had our pump yesterday was that on Friday, if you remember, on QQQ, we got very close to the upper Bollinger, but unfortunately we did not hit the upper Bollinger itself. As of yesterday, did hit the upper Bollinger. You closed within that level. And so from today, we are looking for a higher high into consolidation to the 5 mile. Now, for the SPY, I don't think this is pushing the upper Bollinger more, but could be mistaken. No, it's not. Very likely we won't see the upper Bollinger pushed to again, but I do believe we saw a 5 mile test in here, which is right there. From that 5 mile test, potentially can be pushing into the upper Bollinger again. Now, I'm not anticipating us to do so, but that can be a potential. Not really expecting it though. But that's why we pumped yesterday, is because QQQ did win, or did aim for that upper Bollinger day one. So with the upper Bollinger day two coming in, we will be looking for a short position. Okay, so what we're looking for is upper Bollinger on the 5 minute time frame to the lower Bollinger here. Now, be very patient with this position. Where you take it, make sure you wait for the upper Bollinger, because very likely that is a cup forming. So we will be aiming for that. Now, our VVIX and everything is probably extremely low today, starting to actually get close to that 98 range. Have to let my cat out in a second. Hold on one second. Sorry about that. Okay. Anyway, VVIX is starting to get down to an extremely low point, which is this 98 range. This means that we're starting to get to that point where we're getting out of the selling range. So potentially, if the market continues pushing, we could see market really shift away from some of this bearishness. Now we're seeing this a little bit. See this within the 5 mile, the 10 mile, and the 20 mile is still below the 200 mile right here. So we're not fully out yet, but with the price action currently, the 20 mile will be pulling over 200 mile. and very likely we will be contesting that 50-mile range next few weeks. Okay. All right, so here's the push here. Now again, really look for this 688.84 prior to taking short. And this short again is just taking cup top here into the handle. So look for that 688.84, probably slightly above that, so that's 689 range. Excuse me. But from that 689, that would be a very good short into the 688 5-minute Bollinger. Okay, I just want to look at a couple things really quick. The oil is down today. I haven't checked the news or anything. My arm was hurting really bad yesterday. Oh, my hand. Okay, so the short entry is there. We see HIG pushing up today. We see liquid pushing up. QQQ should be aiming for a new higher high today. On QQQ, short here is really, really good. Basically a whole $2 of downside, not potentially more. VIX pulling up a little bit, was at that 100. That's at the 152 currently. That explains yesterday why we didn't see the market really calming down when we did have the short positions available. That's just because the market for QQQ is trying to push that upper Bollinger, which for QQQ, I believe was like, what, a whole $7 above the level? But it did aim for the level, so now that it's been hit, we can look for our 5-ma. 5-ma is currently at the 613.40, so plenty of room to the downside. Now, I'm not expecting that to hit today. Excuse me. Usually this is a period of, 2 to 3 sessions. So, and no, I'm not closing any sort of my or any of the puts that I opened yesterday. Those are all staying open currently. They are all very dated, so I'm not too worried about this move. Good morning, everybody. Hopefully we will all have a much better trading day today than we did yesterday. So we did take the short position here. I'm currently in the 620 puts. Now again, I will be exiting the 620 puts basically right at this 20-ma, leaving some runners to run, just in case this is going to break down into a further head and shoulders. Again, with today on QQQ hitting the day two upper Bollinger higher high. Um, the expectation really should be that we should be seeing some form of bear structure at the top here to pull downward, very likely towards that 619.32. So I will be having runners trying to aim for that range, but excuse me, the majority of my profits I will be taking at that 20 mil. 20 mils at the 620.82. I will be looking for closer to that 620.60. Seeing some large share sales going through on Q and on SPY as well. So these levels should be very good to go. Look at semiconductors really quick. Semiconductors are telling us that there's room to the call upside. So I do want to look at Nvidia, I want to look at Microsoft and some of these other names really quick. Because with semiconductors pulling down here, this is something we're expecting to see throughout the SPY QQQ. Not so much semiconductors here. So let's see if semiconductors pushed the upper bound yesterday. Let's see here. So let's go to the hourly. Go to this. So Friday was a 5 mile test for semiconductors, which means that upper Bollinger day one was yesterday. Day two today. So semiconductors as well, we should be expecting a push downward. So with this showing that there's actually room on the call side here, kind of dislike that. Is that potentially QQQ and SPY can be pushing up a lot higher too. So we'll be watching that. Oh, I do want to look at the structure here. Now, structurally here, do have this inverse cup. And from this inverse cup, we should be anticipating a small handle upward, which that small handle upward would likely coincide with the rest of the market pulling down once we get that level. And this would create a head and shoulders. If it is truly aiming for that liquidity. I'm still keeping my puts here. It's me. Hold on one second. Need to get some water here in a second, but I'm still keeping my puts on SPY. Thing we have to be careful about though is with semiconductors showing that it does want to build this handle upward. We do have to be careful because on SPY and everything that means further upside prior to the push downward. So that's something we do have to kind of contend with here. Um, Now VVIX is back at the 105, well 100.05. Pulled down to the 99.94. So we're going to be watching this very closely. Again, this 98 range is a very crucial range. So we will see if the market aims for that today to really contest that range, or if we're going to see volatility pick up a little bit as we start to see some of these day two upper Bollinger higher highs coming in. Excuse me, as we start to pull downward. So okay, I need to go get some water really quick. So I don't sound like I'm dying. I'm gonna write a little note really quick. Okay, so just a quick note there. I'm gonna go make some coffee really quick, so I might be on for like 5 minutes. But I will be right back, everybody. I do have my phone with me. I just can't talk. So I will be typing in chat if anything important pops up while I'm making coffee. So I'll be right back, everybody. But short position looks really, really good right here. All right, and I am back, everybody. Okay, so let's see what's going on. 1 minute time frame. We are starting to see a bit of a breakdown, and this is on the SPY. Doesn't look very good, but the Head and Shoulders liquidity does exist within there. Sometimes you'll see within these patterns that they can kind of go off to the side like that rather than being straight across. Kind of hard to describe um, in the exact moment, but this is something I've seen quite often where the structure shifted a little bit, but the liquidity is still all within, the structure still. We still have the left shoulder, still have the head, we still have the right shoulder. If this is still going to be a bearish structure, then we will see this cup close. From the cup closing, small handle heading downward. Okay. Yes, I'm still holding TQQ puts for next week. Currently I'm holding the 48 strikes. Now I do want to go, and actually thank you for bringing that up. I do want to add some for next week here. Um, so one moment, because we might just add to the 48 strike that we have, seeing how TQQ is only near 52. But I want to fully ensure that we secure this level. So just one moment. Let's go for the technicals really quick. 5 mile, 49.72. 20 miles at the 44.91. So technically we can target that 44 range, which means that the 48 is still viable. So I'm going to add a few of the 50 puts here for TQQQ, and then I'm going to also add a few of the 48s to my current position because I do think that that 48 strike will hit. But I do like both of those very much. Hold on, I actually want to post those in the Discord. Okay, all right, got that shared. Okay, and we are still just looking for this pull down. Now we're starting to see the upper Bollinger, or the price, um, pull away from this upper Bollinger. So very likely we should be expecting our 20 mo if I can properly grab the arrow. And that's the expectation. I'll just kind of keep this up here as a side note for everybody. Now I want to look at semiconductors. So semiconductors still hugging towards that lower Bollinger with bearish structure at the bottom. So This is a bit of a double top on the 1 minute time frame. And very likely it's going to let's look at some of this prior liquidity here. Let's mark it out really quick. So crucial level and crucial level. And make these not so wide so they're not so annoying to look at. Or this is still our expectation on semiconductors. So with this structure telling us that very likely it wants to head downward. Downside from here would be at that 391.64 to begin with. Okay. Now, let's just check something else. Thing that I'm primarily looking at here on semiconductors is that there's this big chunk of liquidity right there. So I am really expecting this to build over there as well. Um, which would mean that the price is going to be between this 394 to roughly this 395. So I'm looking for that to build. Um, Even though we are looking for the downside overall, this doesn't have to build. Technically, this can just form this inverse cup, break that downside, and then aim for further structure from there, or just aim for a larger inverse cup off of one of these prices. But that's something I'm kind of concerned with, okay? Especially when we are trying to short the SPY, short QQQ, short everything else because that means that we could be seeing a lot of chop in here. Now, volatility, basically close to the low of the day, is pulling down towards that 99 range, so hit the 99.06, at the 99.15 currently. So volatility is still, you know, heading down very, very aggressively on the day. Okay. Volatility heading down pretty aggressively on the day does allude to um, buying within equities. So we will see how this all turns out. But we do have to be careful with, again, semiconductors being at that lower Bollinger. It does create the conditions where they can have a very large bounce to the upside. Let's see. This pulls up to the 689.85, then this will create a small cup, which will somewhat invalidate this right shoulder. So very likely going to hit that level. Now semiconductors are pulling down below that range that we talked about, so that could be getting ready to take SPY and QQQ here in a little bit too. We do see that double top starting to play out a little bit further. To adjust, I'll just turn off the notification. So watching this level very closely because I need to see if we are going to have this bounce to the upside or not. Good. Nice rejection there. And if QQQ can, or if semiconductors can continue their rejection, then this is going to look very, very good. On QQQ, we have pretty much nothing but bearish structure built on the day so far. Now, 1 minute time frame, do have this inverse cup. Just also, excuse me, losing my voice again, which is also a double top and working on, creating full or filling out this inverse cup towards the bottom. From the bottom of that inverse cup, you then should be expecting a small handle. So slightly further upside prior to fully pulling down here. But our current puts should be absolutely fine. Yeah, a lot of the data sets and everything came out really good today. Hold on, let me drink some water. I apologize. My voice has just been cutting out like crazy today. All right, hopefully I could talk a minute without my voice cutting out. Anyway, with the overall market and with, news, narrative, anything else, usually the chart will kind of gravitate towards what's going on with the news and everything. Thank you. 1 second, let me just mute my microphone 1 moment. Sorry about that. My wife was giving me some coffee. Anyway, so the chart likes to really move towards or gravitate towards where the data or news is headed. Um, so it's kind of like when we got to the 20 mile here. When we got to the 20 mile here on SPY, while I was still bearish and expecting a rejection to the downside, the SPY pulled to this level almost to the penny right before a major news event, which was when President Trump was giving that speech that Wednesday night, discussing if we were, going to basically continue further in the war with Iran or if we were going to, see a ceasefire or whatever. And then that night we had the ceasefire. Okay, so the market set itself up for that news with it pushing into the upper Bollinger here. Um, this is giving the market that room for that bullish push. So this is showing us that there's good data, good earnings, good narrative going on here. Okay. Um, so even though I will pay attention to the overall narrative going on with, what's going on in real life, um, generally real life likes to coincide a lot with our charts. So while it's good to not ignore the news and everything else. It's still important to always trade your technicals and fundamentals first and foremost. Excuse me. Because at least with the technicals, you're not just basing trades off of, vibes or emotions or anything else. You're basing it off of actual back-tested data. Our Head and Shoulders has been validated. So our short entry here, they have once again burned, but I'm still holding this short because again, today is upper Bollinger on QQQ day 2 and on semiconductors, so we are expecting a pull downward. Bearish structure still holding very present within semiconductors here. QQQ looks like it's wanting to create a cup here. Hasn't fully done so, but it's only about 20 cents off that level. I'd be very surprised if it didn't. Now, if it doesn't make the cup here, then this turns into a very large inverse cup and handle slash double top. So that's kind of interesting to look for if we don't complete that level. But we're only about 17 cents off, 20 cents off that level. Really do expect it to be pushed here. I just want to look at the volatility because it's probably pushing that new low. Yep, it is at the 98.18. So it is literally hugging that range where it's telling us that selling is pretty much out the window. Which it's been weeks and weeks and weeks since we've been to this level. It's actually been, I think, a few months now since we've been back here. Yeah, last time we were at this range was early February slash late January. Now, semiconductors here. Again, we were talking about this morning how with it being at this lower Bollinger does create the conditions where it can, um, you know, build out towards the upside. Now, again, we are looking for this larger right shoulder. Let's go ahead and measure this out properly. So we're really looking for this larger right shoulder in the day, which again, that takes us between this 94 to roughly that 395.50 range on semiconductors. So for SPY QQQ, that was that concern right here, that we could be pushing upward due to that. Now, we did not complete this cup fully on QQQ, I don't think. We did. Okay, we did. It did fully complete that cup. So from this cup, we are looking for a handle. Now, personally, I am looking for this handle to break down into the day. I'm not expecting this bullish cup handle to form. I'm expecting more of a double top to form on the day. But we do need to start seeing our volatility picking up. We're basically right at that 98 range. Um, so I will be expecting a slight increase to really signify that we will be pushing down. I do want to swap back to the 5-minute time frame here. Now, on this breakout, I will be taking an additional short if, it pushes up into the upper Bollinger here again. It's looking very likely. Yeah, so I'm going to let this push just a little bit. Now, I do want to look at semiconductors. Okay, so this is that 95 range that we were talking about. So I'm really looking towards this 90 or 395.40. So once we hit that on semiconductors, then I'm going to short SPY slash QQQ. But waiting for that level on semiconductors to hit. Do want to see if some of this prior bearish structure does get invalidated or not. BVIX is at the 97, 96. So pushing down pretty low. Okay, so getting ready to enter my shorts here on SPY and QQQ. But I do want to see some sort of movement from the VVIX prior to our entry. So it's currently at the 97, 92. I will be waiting for a push upward within the VVIX. So semiconductors starting to push upward pretty well. SPY giving us our level. But again, I want to wait until we see something within the VVIX tell us that we're going to be seeing some downside here. Because potentially we're going to be pushing up towards this 691. So just currently being very, very patient. We're waiting for either, continuing to push upward or we're waiting for our volatility to give us a small ping to the upside. But something to tell us that we're actually going to see this short be successful, not just get blown out of the water here again. BVIX still pulling downward, so again, do not enter this short until we see that starting to tick upward. Now with these puts, we could still be targeting the 689, so that's still an absolutely fine strike. Again, just be very, very, very patient here. Just wait for our volatility to tick upward, because it's just been absolutely tearing to the downside right now. Um, so just wait on this short until we see our tick upward. Going to delete this note. We did get our push upward like we expected, even though it is not to our liking. Now we are being very patient on the short. We're waiting for some form of uptick within our volatility. It's currently at the 96.82. So I want to see something really substantial within here prior to us entering these 0DTs here. Now semiconductors starting to invalidate some of this prior bearish structure. We have to watch this very closely because again, on the 5-minute time frame, this is still very much within bearish structure. Okay, still have this inverse cup. Technically, we had the bullish structure at the bottom of that cup to create the handle. This could be that handle to the upside, especially when we're seeing the 20 mile being tested on semiconductors. This can create the rejection to the downside that we're looking for. Now, VVIX still holding that 96.84. So I'm being very patient here. Let's go ahead and delete some of this drawing because it doesn't matter right now. Still being super, super, super patient. I just want to see some form of uptick in our volatility prior to our entry here. Even if that means we have to make a few cents less, I'd rather do that than buy another put into a burned entry. So now semiconductors starting to pull down here. This is looking very good in terms of a rejection off the 20 mile and the 5 minute time frame. So this is something we're very much looking for and really expecting a lot of chop throughout the day because there's a lot of range on this right shoulder to be built out. So I do expect a lot of chop today. And that's why we're just going to be super, super patient before we re-enter the shorts on the day. Now, again, they did not really give us range to enter calls too much. They gave us close to the lower Bollinger, but again, that's not within what I'm looking for an entry. So did not take that call to the upside. Just waiting for any signal really. That's why it's good we didn't take these short positions right here. It's better we wait for our volatility to start picking back upward. You take these positions. Now with this earlier put, um, I am gonna go ahead and just exit out of it. Usually I'd wait for it, um, because I am expecting, downside on the day. We do have the upper Bollinger Day 2 hitting, and we're on QQQ and on semiconductors. So those are both telling us that we should be seeing some form of downside within the day. So usually I would hold those puts because that would be meaning we would be seeing further downside. However, on semiconductors here, we're expecting some chop, okay? Really expecting a lot of chop in here. So with that chop, I do really want to wait for our volatility to tell us that the short position's going to be very solid. Now we're seeing a little bit of a pop upward, but nothing major. Again, I really want to see basically above this 98 range because being below this 98 range means that the market is kind of in that undecided phase. We can start selling while we're in the yellow, but we can also start buying as well. So I really want to see this start spiking upward if we're going to be seeing the downward consolidation within the day, like I'm fully anticipating. So that's what I'm expecting overall. Um, but I do want to see the actual level starting to push prior to that. Yes, we could be entering shorts here. And yes, there is room to the downside, but again, I want to be very safe on these positions rather than just burn money. So waiting for our short position to open within the volatility. We want to see our volatility pushing towards the upside here. From that upside, it will give us a fairly solid short within the rest of the day. As again, we're not expecting a bounce off the 20 mile here. We're pretty much expecting to create bearish structure at the top here and start heading downward to consolidate towards the daily 5 miles um, on QQQ and semiconductors. But that also kind of applies towards SPY consolidating towards its 5 mile as well. Again, we're waiting for a push upward in our volatility. Not seeing that yet. Bitcoin seeing a little bit of tapering here from its upper Bollinger on the 5 mile or 5-minute time frame. Big little bit of tapering. Look at Nvidia and Microsoft. Now, Nvidia, we have to be cautious that this potentially can be trying to form that cup back up to the upside. That would take it back up towards the 193.21. So we will circle back to that in a little bit. Now, Microsoft here, potentially forming a head and shoulders, but we can also see this cup form as well, which is kind of that same cup that we're seeing on the video. So we will just mark that, but the expectation here is this head and shoulders. Okay, and this is some of that bearish structure we would be expecting at the top of QQQ and semiconductors as well. So EVIX still pushing downward. So it's at the 96.10. So just let it chop out. Just let the chop do its thing. And from the chop, we will find a short position into the day. Semiconductors starting to see a little bit of a push downward. But again, volatility is kind of telling us the opposite story. So we're just being super patient. Did I exit the previous puts? I exited the 0 DTEs. I did not exit the puts for next week or anything. Um, yes, the 689 puts are the ones that we will be looking for. Even with the push upward that we're seeing, the 20 MOS is at the 689.11. So once we do see our short entry open, um, the 689 is exactly what we're looking for here. So those will be just fine, but we are waiting for the entry still. Again, our volatility is still telling us we're pushing downward, or upward within equities, downward within volatility. So as long as that's the case, um, we're going to continue to be patient and wait. Now, structurally, semiconductors not really doing anything too impressive here. We do see this cup with potentially this handle starting to form. Seeing that cup forming on SPY as well. And volatility is still just telling us that equities are going to be pushing upward. So now for the call upside, um, it's not that I'm allergic to calls. I would usually be entering the call upside, but I'm looking for specifically these lower Bollinger entries. This is the 1 minute time frame. I need to show the 5 minute time frame. But I'm specifically looking for these lower Bollinger entries. Now, we talked about on semiconductors how this could be, you know, potentially very good on the day, but we did see a lot of bear structure in this, and overall in the day we are expecting downward consolidation. So with the downward consolidation, you can take calls into that. Um, but the whole, thesis of the day is that we're going to be consolidating downward. So not ideal to take the calls into unless the call position really opens up. But then SPY, call position really didn't open up here. It was close, but we did not see our lower Bollinger hit here, which means it's kind of just a missed entry. Semiconductors did hit their lower Bollinger. And on QQQ, did right before open. So technically the call's very close to that lower Bollinger entry. Um, I mean, technically it tapped the level. So if you were quick with those QQQ calls, you would have been able to take it. But the true lower Bollinger entry was prior to the open. Just a lot of chop here. If we can go to the 20 MA, um, then there's some room for call upside potentially. But overall, for taking calls into the upside, on the daily time frame, I'm looking for you push into the 20 mile here. My daughter's here to say good morning. Good morning, Amelia. Good morning. You're running like a cheetah? Oh, freaking cute. Hold on, I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. She's running around my room saying she's a cheetah. So for the calls here, what would have been ideal, which we actually did take calls. We had those 46 TQQQ calls that we exited last week, um, which would have still been very great into this week. I just did not expect the QQQ upper Bollinger to be pushed. But from the 20 mile on the daily time frame, we did take those QQQ or those TQQQ calls. I believe they're for the 46 strike. So those did very well for us. But that's when I usually try to take my calls is at the 20 mile or at the lower Bollinger when it comes to the SPY or overall tech anyway. Still seeing semiconductors chop in here. And we still see volatility pulling downward. So not going to short until we see volatility pulling upward. But I'm not really wanting to enter calls into this yet because semiconductors, I'm kind of expecting, again, just a lot of this consolidation. Not really expecting a push to the upside here. Now, with volatility pulling downward, we absolutely can push the upside. But I am expecting, again, overall, for volatility to pick back upward towards this 98 range today. So we're being very patient on our short position until we see volatility pick up. But that's primarily what I'm looking for today. I'm really not looking to take the call upside, even if we are seeing a lot of pushing out of equities overall. Um, if we don't take the entry, then I kind of don't want it. And especially, the overall thesis of the day is that we really are expecting downward consolidation because again, with QQQ and semiconductors pushing their upper Bollingers, um, the back tested historical thing to do is for it to consolidate to the downside. So that's what we look for today. But we do need to see volatility tick upward prior to that. So it's basically going to be a very boring day. Um, just waiting for volatility to tick upward. Now, in terms of structure, not really seeing a whole lot of structure here. We see this sort of a micro cup forming. We had this earlier cup from this morning, but nothing substantial from that. It's not like we're seeing inverse head and shoulders. We're not seeing, some major cup and handle starting to form here. So in terms of the bullish structure, nothing really spectacular. It's just kind of pushing to push. Slight uptick in volatility, but just a few cents, so doesn't matter. I want to see a few dollars of upside really. Now, everybody's drip positions should be doing very well. From the shares that I entered yesterday, I'm up 25 cents a share. So actually I want to look at drip here. Yeah, drip's almost at $5. So almost at our call range or at our, within our in the money calls. And it is starting to reject this bearish structure that we did identify. So that's super awesome. It's great for our drip positions. Now, I haven't checked the news too much today, so if anyone has, if you can just very, very quickly give me the rundown on what's going on with the whole Iran conflict. Um, are we going to be seeing a ceasefire? Are we, what's going on with that? We know it changes pretty much every day, so now we are starting to see a little bit of a push downward in SPY here and also within QQQ. So let's check our volatility. Our volatility is still just pushing downward to the low of the day, so we are going to be patient. There will be a short position opening within the day. Um, but again, like I said, I expect an absurd amount of chop today. Um, Semiconductors are really telling us we could chop pretty much the entire session. Put this back to where it was. So that would be towards the end of the day there. I'm expecting a lot of chop out of semiconductors here though. Potentially a micro versus head and shoulders. So we will watch for that. Hold on, I'm getting a phone call really quick. I will be right back. My daughter's teacher called in, so I have my daughter today, which is fine. But I do need to go let my wife know really quick. We're just gonna watch volatility here for a little bit, as fun as that is watching paint dry, but I will be right back in just a couple minutes. So I do need to kind of figure out the plans of the day. But all we're really waiting for today is, again, we're waiting for volatility to pick up so that we can short SPY slash tech, because we are expecting a downward consolidation within SPY slash tech. So the rule of nine is working well on INTC. Yeah, the rule of nine is super, super. I mean, it works almost to a T. I've only seen it fail, I think, one time in like the 4 years I've known you, 4 or 5 years I've known you now. So, um, yeah, the rule of nine is very, very, very good. And I think it ended up taking on day 10 of that move. So um I believe I've only seen it fail a single time that I can remember just from, memory. But anyway, I'll be right back, everybody. So just a couple minutes, but let's go ahead and look at volatility. I know that some of you don't have the fully updated futures going, which is entirely okay. So my GVIX will show you a more accurate level. So anyway, I'll be right back in just a couple minutes. We're waiting for a volatility pop to short. So I'm actually going to write a little note. Okay. All right, everybody. I will be right back in just a few minutes because again, I do want to kind of plan my day out really quick. Um, so what we're looking for, we're starting to see this pull upwards slightly. So, let me just go ahead and look at the SPY. SPY is at the 691.05. So I am looking for this to pull up multiple dollars. Again, we want to see this much closer to that 98 range. So, okay, that's what we're looking for. I'll be right back, everybody. All right, sorry about that, everybody. Okay, so let's go ahead and look over everything. SPY continuing to see push upward. Semiconductors, we are seeing a push upward. Now, what I will be looking for on semis is specifically a head and shoulders here. Now, I know many might be, thinking that I'm looking for bearish structure all the time. Um, this is just purely primarily because, again, today is the upper Bollinger Day 2. Backtests do tell us that we should be seeing downward consolidation. Okay. Within semiconductors, it is very likely we're going to see this upper Bollinger on the 5-minute time frame hit. Okay, so just be aware of that, be prepared for that. The upper Bollinger is at the 697.53. See, it's hit 697.08. So close to that range. But the full expectation should be that we would be pulling upward toward that range. So I am looking for a little bit of a bullish cup here to form. From that bullish cup, a handle to the upside. So that's what we will be looking for out of semiconductors. Now, volatility slightly spiking upward, but I shouldn't even say spiking. It's barely pulling upward. Um, again, the low of the day is at the 94.96. We're still very far from that, that range that's telling us, yes, we're starting to sell. Okay, get rid of that. So we still have a while on that. It's very likely should coincide here with semiconductors seeing this cup finish out towards the upside. So I am expecting that, but I also wouldn't be surprised if we pulled downward towards this, this purple block I've outlined. Again, that's a very large chunk of liquidity over here, which that's what we will be looking for that right shoulder, for this larger head and shoulders. This liquidity is still within that range. It's not invalidating it or anything else yet. We also have this inverse cup built here, so this can be a handle on that inverse cup. So seeing this larger or this smaller head and shoulders here forming wouldn't, be entirely unexpected. If we start to see this form, then that would be the short entry on SPY. Um, but again, I do want to see volatility really pulling upward quite a bit. I want to see this pulling up multiple dollars. Reason why you want to see the VVIX pulling up because unlike the VIX itself, the VVIX is monitoring the futures, which means that for the price to move up, people have to be buying into it. Okay. Um, for futures contracts, for what this fund is, this is usually only used by, very, very, very big money. So if the price is moving up in this, then that means very big money is starting to hedge the downside. I don't want to enter positions until I start seeing big money hedging the downside. Um, Earlier was a little different as we were still in this red range. We were still in this, very, very concerning volatility range. But with us starting to head down pretty low within the day, we're now back in this cautionary zone. So we do need to see this pull upward quite a bit here before we really fully enter these puts on the day. We are seeing this 20-mile rejection out of semiconductors on the 1-minute time frame. 5 minute time frame that will pull us back towards the 20 mile. 20 mile being at the 695.41. So we're literally right about there. So very likely that's trying to form that head and shoulders. Okay. So once we pull up from this range, because the likelihood is that we very likely will to form that right shoulder. Okay. This is when we're going to enter those short positions on the day. Okay, is on this right shoulder. So be very patient for this push downward. Let this push downward happen. Um, but that right shoulder is going to be the entry. Um, by that point, we should also be seeing our volatility around that 97, 98 range as well. 5 minute time frame. Still kind of just in between everywhere. So really wait for that right shoulder. Um, while that right shoulder forms, very likely we will see the upper Bollinger pull downward. That right shoulder would probably give us that upper Bollinger move on the 5 minute time frame. QQ working on some further bear structure. We did talk about this on QQQ, how we were expecting this to turn into a head and shoulders, or not a head and shoulders, but a double top earlier. If I remember correctly, I want to say it was QQQ we were talking about that on. So this is starting to hit. Um, with SPY, means we're at 691. Our volatility starting to pick upward here. So we're starting to get a little movement that we're looking for. But do kind of want to be patient on these positions still. Because again, with semiconductors hitting that bottom range that it did hit at the 394, 97, 96, whatever it did, um, it is starting to pull up a little bit from that range. So this is really, really alluding to building that right shoulder. So if we can get that right shoulder, um, that's going to be our, our entry. So that's what we're looking for on the day. We're looking for this right shoulder to pull upward, looking for volatility to also pick up. QQQ here, now that it has closed this inverse cup here, I did draw that out a little extended, I apologize. We should be expecting slight bullish structure from the bottom to create the handle to continue pulling us downward. So this is going to coincide a lot with that right shoulder on semiconductors. So that's really going to be the entry point on these shorts today. Just a couple things I want to look at here. So here's the rule of nine. Sorry, I couldn't reach out earlier. So the rule of nine is that if you have 9 green sessions in a row, um, that usually on that ninth session, you're going to start seeing it pull downward. Okay. Um, usually you don't see that ninth session staying green um, across the board. It also works that way with 4 red days as well. We can look back for some of those in a little bit. But if you have 8 red day or 9 red days in a row, usually on that ninth red day, you should be expecting a green day. Inversely, for green days, 9 green days in a row, you should be expecting some selling from that. So that is the rule of nine. It is super, super, super consistent. See, this actually looks like it is kicking in. So we do have a little bit of that kicking in into QQQ as well. Maybe even the semiconductors here. So currently we are waiting for this right shoulder to build, waiting for a little bit more structure on SPY, waiting for volatility to continue pulling upward. And for QQQ, I do want to see a little bit of a bounce here. All right, everybody. So, because my daughter is going to be staying home today, I'm going to go out or go take her out to do something. Um, with that said, if there is any final questions or anything anybody wants to go over, I'll be happy to do so. But the expectations for the day should be set. Um, really, we're waiting for this right shoulder to build out on semiconductors. Very likely, it will coincide with the upper Bollinger on the 5-minute time frame pulling downward, testing that 5-minute Bollinger, or the upper Bollinger on the 5-minute time frame, and then pulling downward. Okay, so the goal of the day is to set up those puts. Um, no, I've not closed any of my puts for next week or that are super dated. I'm keeping these all going. Again, I'm still pretty bearish about the market overall. Um, I don't have time to exactly explain my whole thesis currently, but even with this oil volatility, we still have the Bank of Japan needing to heavily unwind positions. Um, After this occurs, and they were already starting to unwind positions prior to the whole war starting. Um, they had to put that on pause almost entirely, as once the war starts, all central banks pretty much just pause everything they're doing. So, um, semiconductors starting to build that right shoulder. Sorry, I'm just looking at that. Um, but with that, we're expecting the Bank of Japan to be selling off quite a bit of securities over this year. Um, so even with the oil volatility starting to calm down, still have a lot of selling in the books. Now, for the short on SPY slash QQQ, I'm entirely waiting on semiconductors here to build this right shoulder. Okay, well, shouldn't say entirely. I'm waiting for semiconductors to build the right shoulder. Plus, I'm waiting for the BVIX to pull upward. Again, I really want to see it towards that like 98 plus, but may not get that on a day like today. But if we do start seeing this spiking upward, that will be the signal to short. But ideally, we do want to see this right shoulder built out. Top end of this right shoulder could be around that 396.20-ish. Um, again, with head and shoulders, sometimes we do see the right or left shoulder extended a little bit, so don't be surprised if it's off a few cents. But that is what we're looking for to shorten to today. With QQQ, see this really nice inverse cup build with this very nice double top. So with QQQ and semiconductors, we're starting to see the bearish structure forming on the day, which is exactly what we're wanting to see when um, the daily time frame is telling us that today was the upper Bollinger Day 2. and that we should be seeing a downward consolidation from both of these after their higher high. So those are starting to kick in. We're starting to see the bear structure forming. So that's very good. Very likely we're going to see a leg upward in volatility very soon here, as dealers should be preparing for that downside if we're truly going to be seeing it. Now, we are starting to see Bitcoin pulling back as well. So again, this is also a very good signal that equities could truly be wanting to, um, you know, pull back slightly. On the downside today, um, that is a great question. Now, I had this marked on semiconductor. No, we have it marked in the SPY. Or no, semiconductors. So for semiconductors, and I will correlate this in the SPY in a second here. The downside is quite large. Okay. We're really looking towards this 391 or the 388. For SPY, that would be around this, around this 384.95-ish range. Now again, I'm not fully expecting that to hit today, but that is a liquidity range that I'm looking for. So this range is between the 687 and the 684.91. What this range would do is give us further bearish structure to the downside, which again, we are really expecting quite a bit of downside from this overextension. And I say overextension because it's just pretty much a massive rally from the 20 mile. It's not really overextending anything though. Now, with today's high, we did pull up to the 691.80 or 68. Technically, there can be this potential cup at this 691.89. Um, Not really anticipating that, but even if we are seeing a major cup on the daily time frame, then even then we're expecting a handle to form, so we expect bearish structure at the top and to head back down, towards the 5 mile, 20 mile. So with this push into the upper Bollingers on QQQ, semiconductors, it's really telling us that the upside is starting to want to taper out slightly. So yeah, that's the expectation. Um, Basically on this next BVIX pop to the upside, that's going to be the short entry because that will be the right shoulder on um, these smaller head and shoulders through SPY and semiconductors. So whenever we see the next volatility pop, that is going to be the entry. But yeah, other than that, I'm going to be watching for that entry. Um, on SPY here, it's pretty much going to be at the 691.40, maybe slightly above it, but at that 691.40, I'm going to go ahead and take a few puts for the end of the week. And these puts, I want the 689 puts. Even though our 5 minute 20 mile has pulled upward, um, I'm okay with the 690 puts or the 689 puts for the end of the week. It's well above our 5 mile level, so with our 5 mile consolidations, we should be fully anticipating, um, those ranges to hit. Semiconductors building that right shoulder, SPY hitting our level. I am going to go ahead and enter those puts. So give me just a second. Okay, I am currently in the 689 puts at 273, and these are for April 17th. Fine, even with this extending a little bit here, because within semiconductors, it should still be within that bounds of the right shoulder. Just to be a little careful with these puts, but overall, I kind of see everything that I want to see. Other than volatility, I do want to see pulling upward quite a bit. Now, the dollar has been pulling down over the last few days, but this does coincide very much so with oil prices pulling downward. Now, again, I haven't been able to really look at the news today, so I have no clue what's going on with the conflict, but I am expecting semiconductors and QQQ to see a downward consolidation within the day. So we will be targeting that. That's what my puts are going to be targeting. Volatility still very low on the day here. So again, we do want to see this pulling upward. I'm just not going to be around to monitor it. So that's why I went ahead and entered those puts that I did. But yeah, that should be the expectation of the day. All right, everybody. I hope you'll have a great rest of your days. I will, or not days, but day. Um, I will not be streaming tomorrow again because remember I am getting my stitches taken out during the pre-market or during the open. So I'm just not going to be around. I will very likely be posting a video tomorrow night though. Um, I'll try to post a video tonight. I didn't have a chance to post one yesterday because my hand was hurting too bad. But the expectation should be set for the day. Um, and I'm not really expecting anything too crazy outside from that. So with that said, I hope everyone has a great day. Hopefully your trades go successful. I know our put earlier did not go well, but tends to happen sometimes. Last few days they have been really cooking our 0 DTE puts. Just unfortunate. When we did enter, our volatility was still above the 100 range, and we were seeing some bearish structure. So I still agree with that put entry, even though it didn't fully get us down to our 20 mile. And I do expect volatility to pull up towards this 98 range today, but we will see come end of the day. So yeah, you're very welcome. Have a great day, everybody. Take care. Have,